Hi, the weather is getting cooler where we are, and one of our favorite foods since the weather gets cooler is chili. And chili, making it low carb, is really pretty easy if you focus on the meats. Now, obviously there's not going to be any meats in this chili, but this is a recipe that I put together, a year or two ago, and my family loves it. So, what I've started with in my meat-based chili is just a little over a pound of ground beef. Now this is 80-20 ground beef. I've got my big pot. I actually put some bacon fat in, probably 2 tablespoons of bacon fat, and then I browned my ground beef. I didn't drain it, so all that wonderful fat is still in there. To that, I'm going to add a pound of pork. Now this is just pork, like pork chops that I've cut up, and you can see that I've cut it in fairly small pieces. They're little cubes, and that's just going to brown up in that fat with the ground beef. And the hardest part of all this is just getting the meat all brown before you add all the spices. But anyway, so I've got a pound of 80-20 ground beef, and I've added a pound of pork. Now this is a meat chili, so I'm going to add a third meat to this. I'm going to add some steak, and this is just round steak. It hasn't been cooked. This is just round steak that I cut in cubes, and the texture becomes really important to this. So you've got the minced ground beef, and then you've got the steak and the pork. Now the pork doesn't need to be an expensive, or the beef, neither of these need to be expensive cuts. You're going to let it simmer in the tomato sauce, and so it's going to be naturally tender. So this is probably just round steaks. Whatever I find on sale, I buy up, throw it in the freezer, and then when it's cooler weather and I want to make chili, I've got the ingredients to do it. I'm going to let that brown and get cooked really well, and let's talk about spices. Okay. So when you're doing your chili, the carbs come from spices. Spices do have some carbs, so be aware of that. And from the tomato products that you use in it. Traditional chili carbs can come from beans, but we already said we're going to leave that out. So the meat, for the most part, doesn't have very many carbs, if any at all. So that we don't have to worry about in terms of servings and carbs per serving. Let's put some salt in. Now I'm adding salt because I tend to crave salt on a keto diet, but also because the tomatoes I'm using has no salt. So that's a full teaspoon of salt. I'm also going to put in a full teaspoon of onion powder. And along with the onion powder, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons, this is 2 full tablespoons of minced onion. Now, remember, I'm cooking a pretty big volume here because I've got 3 pounds of meat. So keep in mind that my spices are adjusted for the volume of meat. So that's still browning up. I'm going to give it a stir. And spices can vary by family and what you like. I do want to get all that meat brown. It's not easy when you've got a big pot with a lot of meat to get everything in there and get it brown. But I've got it turned up on high, so it should cook pretty well. But anyway, adjust the spices to your taste and to your favorite chili recipe. In addition to this meat, there are times when I've added some crumbled bacon, or I do, you all know I buy the pre-cooked the real bacon pieces, and I've added maybe a 1/4 cup or so of that just to give it that flavor. In addition, I'm not going to put the wet ingredients in yet because I still want that to brown. But as far as spices, this is 2 tablespoons of chili powder. I might actually add a 3rd tablespoon because I love the chili powder. But for now, I'm going to stick to 2 tablespoons. And it does have carbs, so I try to be careful with that. This is garlic powder. This is a full tablespoon of garlic powder. That's 1 tablespoon. And the video description will have the recipe. This is a full tablespoon of cumin. I really like cumin in my chili. And this is paprika. Paprika is a nice flavor. It doesn't get used a lot, and it's not a very strong flavor. It's a very subtle flavor. Smoked paprika is really tasty, and this is a smoked hot paprika. I'm not going to use that, although I could. I meant to use it and I just poured the wrong thing. But this is a full tablespoon. Actually, I'm sorry, it's 2 teaspoons rather of paprika. Yeah, 2 teaspoons of paprika. I had to double check my notes. So that's all in there. It probably wouldn't hurt to add a teaspoon or so of the hot paprika, the smoked. It just gives it a really nice flavor. And I may do that after I get this stirred around. The pork is browning, the steak is browning, or the beef is browning, and the hamburger was already done. So that meat is browning up and it's starting to smell really good. The spices are getting cooked in all that fat, and that's a good thing. Okay, now that's browning up. Let me add the paprika to this, and I found this just at a local grocer. So I don't know how easy it is to find, and I'm going to put in just a tablespoon since I've already put some paprika. Again, paprika is a very mild flavor. So that's the smoked hot paprika. If you haven't found it, look for it. I love cooking with spices because it does add carbs, but it adds the flavor. Now, I'm going to put something in chili that you probably haven't seen someone do before, and that's okay. I'm going to put butter in the chili. Trust me on this. I can't explain it. I can just tell you it gives you a really rich depth of flavor, and in terms of macros, it helps. Now, this is 4 ounces of Kerrygold butter, and it's unsalted, so you can use salted or unsalted, whichever you prefer. But the butter is really great with the spices and with the meat. And the meat I used, except for the 80-20 ground beef, is fairly lean. And as we always say, butter makes it better. So don't be afraid to add the butter. It's really, you're going to love it. Okay, besides that, I'm going to use 1 cup of strained tomatoes. Now, this cup of strained tomatoes is 14 carbs. That's 14 carbs for the entire pot, which is not bad. How many servings can you get out of a pot? Well, it depends on who's eating and how hungry they are. Usually I can get at least 8 servings out of this, sometimes fewer depending on my family. That doesn't mean they won't eat 2 servings each, but I can usually get 8 servings out of it. So you're doing fewer than 2 carbs for the tomatoes. It's not going to be the rich, thick tomato-based chili that you're used to, only to save carbs. You can put more in there if you can tolerate higher carb counts, but this is a great low-carb meal as long as you don't add too much of the tomato products. I'm going to put some hot water in this, and I'm going to rinse out this cup, and then our chili simply needs to simmer. So hold on. Okay, so I've got this. I've got a little boy behind me who loves Mom's chili. Hey, Jonathan. And when I cook my broth, people ask, do I store that with the fat or not, or do I skim off the fat? I do not skim off the fat when I make beef broth, and that's what this is, beef bone broth. And I've got a video coming up on the beef bone broth. If you've never made it before, it's super, super easy. And it really does make a difference in your recipes. The other thing, the funny thing about making the bone broth is that when I've made it, my family will complain, Mom, that smells bad. Mom, that stinks. But whenever I put it in chili or soup, they always say, this is like the best soup ever, the best chili ever. How'd you do it? Well, it's the bone broth. Don't tell them that though. They think it's like my witch's pot when I'm making bone broth. So that's it. That's our low carb chili. Now, to be sure about the spices, and some people add some cinnamon, and you can do that. But to be sure about the spices, I'm just going to test a little bit. I think it needs more chili powder, but that's really, really good. Let me try again. Again, if you don't mind the carbs, you can put another half cup or another cup of tomato sauce, because you can see this is pretty thin. It will cook down and thicken. It's not heavy on the tomato. If I add If I add another half cup of half cup of tomato puree, it's going to add 7 more carbs, and I probably will add more chili pepper. So right now we're probably in the entire pot with the spices and everything, we're probably at only about 20 carbs. So if I got 8 servings and fewer than 2 total carbs per serving, so adding another half cup is probably not a big deal. You look at your ingredients, what you add, and you can make decisions from there. So let it simmer. In probably 30 to 45 minutes, it'll be done, and you can enjoy some low-carb chili with your family.
Cha-cha-cha!